Ladies and gentlemen, Fictional Representation with our guest presenter, Julian McNaughton. Special presentation for EPHE 585. Let's get ready to learn. Fictional representation. Here we see fictional representations emerging from the depths of traditional qualitative genres. Headed to the land of discovery, what new knowledge with these exciting new methods may we discover? It will help to imagine a fictional representation on a continuum. At one end of the continuum, positioned next to the realist tale, there is creative nonfiction, where the researcher stays very true to factual events, but deliberately falsifies some non-essential details. While realist tales may use pseudonyms or change details for ethical considerations to protect participants, fictional representations go a step further. Leaping to the opposite end of the fictional representation continuum, the researcher imaginatively produces a fictitious work, sometimes termed fictive imagining. Regardless of place on the continuum, the goal of fictional representation remains as a useful contribution to scholarly research. Fictional representation is often chosen for its ability to tell a better story, one that is vivid and engaging, and appeals to a wider audience while maintaining a factual basis and inspiration. So what's the recipe? To create a more engaging story, fictional representation uses a number of conventional literary techniques. We start with the raw facts, the meat and the potatoes, if you will. The researcher actively considers aspects of story, situation, persona, character, scene, and summary in crafting a fictional representation. Let's say we add some spice. When compared to a more static but purely factual ethnography, fictional representation becomes a colorful and more memorable account. Here we've enticed our reader and our audience. To better understand the value and limits of fictional representation, a thorough examination of the genre is necessary. Here we will examine the qualitative genre of fictional representation as follows. First, the assumptions and philosophical beliefs inherent within fictional representation will be explored, including the epistemological and ontological underpinnings. Second, we'll look at concepts of truth and knowledge. And third, the process in which fictional representations are created will be discussed, specifically the methodology and criteria of being there. Fictional representations work based on the ontological assumption that people's subjective experiences are the foundation of their own beliefs and knowledge, their own reality, if you will. However, in reading a fictional representation, there is an interaction that takes place between the researcher and the reader. Together they create shared meanings and understandings of knowledge and truth through an intersubjective process. This interaction may also be referred to as a relativistic ontology. For example, when reading an article, the reader also draws on and incorporates their own past experiences and their, quote, location. In processing new information from a fictional representation, the reader contextualizes the new information with their old knowledge. This experience generates a response, a new piece of knowledge. Epistemologically, then, an effective fictional representation also assumes people are active agents, in control of their emotions and decision-making. So here, the researcher assumes a voluntaristic view of people. A well-written fictional representation is one that creates a strong sense of truth, an account that resonates with the reader. As Clow 1999 offered, the experience and knowledge found in a fictional representation is as true and untrue as the reader makes it in consciousness. In a sense, how believable and engaging the researcher's story is will determine the extent to which it becomes incorporated as knowledge and accepted as their own truth. Sandalowski 1994 offered, "When you talk with me about my research, do not ask what I found. I found nothing. Ask me what I invented, what I made up from and out of my data. I have told the truth. The proof is whether you believe them and whether they appeal to your heart." Well, ultimately, it is the reader who finds or discovers something. Some creative ethnographers have noted that fictional representation actually allows readers a chance to discover more truths than facts alone would. By manipulating and creating characters and scenes, a whole range of truths and perspectives are experienced which readers would not otherwise have been exposed to. Fiction may be seen as a lie that helps us see the truth. It is assumed that the insights and knowledge a reader gains from a fictional representation are very real and therefore can be internalized and used as legitimate knowledge. Fictional representation also assumes the reader will internalize their reading experience and draw knowledge out of this experience. It's assumed the reader cannot separate themselves from the text, and as an emotional being must react. The reader response is real, thus the knowledge they acquire is real and therefore legitimized. The question is raised whether this knowledge is valid or not. Sparks 2002 discussed this at length and suggested that when evaluating the fictional representation genre, we cannot use the traditional scientific views of validity. Instead, we should judge validity based on whether the writing has made a difference and whether it has moved people to action. Fictional representation encompasses a range of techniques, and therefore the process a researcher uses varies. Contrary to a scientific tale, a fictional representation does not always follow a strict methodological approach. While some fictional representations include a highly detailed methods section, including data collection, analysis, and editing, and the writing process, others include little to no methods section at all. In the author-evacuated positivist world of scientific tales, an omission of methods would be incorrigible. However, in fictional representation, some researchers maintain that including such details is unnecessary and may actually detract from the impact of their work. The goal of the process remains to create an experience of believing. The reader must believe what they read for their experience to be authentic and to be deemed successful. In this way, a sense of verisimilitude is achieved. To achieve verisimilitude, the researcher must have an intimate and authentic understanding of the subject they are writing about. Within creative nonfiction, this intimacy is often characterized as a result of the researcher being there. This happens through prolonged engagement and observation. As mentioned, researchers at the creative nonfiction end of the continuum tend to explicitly detail the facts in the research process they used for the basis of their story. Within creative fiction, researchers have also experienced being there, but sometimes in a different sense. For example, in a creative fiction, a researcher may combine a multitude of experiences and characters to form the basis of a fictional representation. The researcher does not necessarily describe actual people or events, but rather creates them from their imagination. The methodological step of editing is a critical piece of creative ethnography. Ethnographers extract, curtail, and rearrange materials from their fieldwork situations to make texts. The influence of the editing process is of paramount importance. Here we are reminded of the negotiation between reader and researcher. The researcher has packaged events and observations into the text, which the reader then unpacks and experiences in relation to their own history. A truth is negotiated through this process, and at its most successful, a catalytic validity achieved. The reader has taken something from the text and can apply it to their life. How then does a fictional representation differ from a novel or newspaper article that has been sensationalized? Well, one important distinction is the ethical treatment of subjects by the researcher. In separating the academic storyteller from the novelist or journalist, Ryan 2007 distinguishes the ethical responsibility a creative ethnographer has both in protecting participants and in honoring the participant's true voice. It's crucial to remember that people we might seek to represent as characters are always far more complex and have a life separate from our texts. However much we disguise people through pseudonyms or other identifying features, we are ethically accountable to them in ways that fiction writers can happily bypass. Here Narayan recognized the intersection of author and characters and the importance of maintaining reflexivity in this praxis in honoring the true voice of those described while being aware of the author's own voice and location within the story. The boundaries of fictional representation are not static. They're fluid and permeable. Researchers working within the genre look to extend knowledge by challenging conventional research parameters. As St. Pierre 1997 stated, if data are the foundation on which knowledge rests, it is important to trouble the common sense understanding of that signifier in post-foundational research that aims to produce different knowledge and to produce knowledge differently. Similarly, Vickers 2010 noted, when creating fiction as part of qualitative research, we're extending the usual choices concerning analysis and representation beyond the normalized boundaries traditionally set by our profession. While the researcher of fictional representation strives to construct an authentic story, they have more latitude to blend fact with fiction. With this flexibility of praxis, it has been argued that the researcher is actually able to construct a stronger truth, a greater sense of verisimilitude, and one that has the power to influence and engage the reader and effect a positive change on the human condition. Thank you for joining us today in this special presentation. We'd like to note our references. Some excellent researchers here.